Today on the podcast, I'm joined by John Johnson, founding CEO of Patmos Hosting. He bootstrapped a data center company from the need he encountered while he was running his web consultancy company, and he did it with no outside capital. He's now building one of the first C-paced finance data centers in the country inside the old Kansas City Star printing press building. And instead of pouring brand new concrete into a data center in the middle of nowhere, since most data centers are just giant boxes that employ almost no one, he's reusing the rest of the building that he doesn't need for the data center into a tech and startup hub with a campus of offices and startups right in downtown Kansas City. This landed him on the front of the Wall Street Journal as the counter narrative to the idea that AI data centers just kill local jobs. One takeaway that I had from my conversation with John is the following quote: "If you control the dirt, you can actually create independence for yourself, for your company, for your mission, and for your clients." And that's the whole thesis of what he's building in one sentence. Control the resources at the source, and everything downstream gets to be yours. John is a first principles thinker taking on the hyperscalers. With a philosophy and theology background, he describes himself as a staunch generalist. He also founded Albertus Magnus Institute, a free online classical liberal arts college alternative with over 1,000 students. And the through line that I see through his work is that he believes technology should serve human freedom, not replace it. In the pod, we dive into several subjects, including how he hasn't raised capital to start his data centers, and his rule of he who pays rules, and what taking VC money actually does to a founder's mission and independence over time. We also dive into the value of authentic humanity, where AI commoditizes and being authentically human now becomes the premium. Just how we go to the grocery store and pay more for organic food, his thesis on authentic humanity is a premium that we might be heading into. We also get into owning your own data and going upstream to the source so that you can control your destiny instead of being the product. And we dive into the heart of the living contradiction, which is at the center of John's work. This is the living contradiction. John warns that AI counterfeits human personhood, that we are elevating artifacts to gods and reducing humans to artifacts, yet he's building the infrastructure AI runs on. And I think his explanation is a thesis for a revolution to take back ownership and control. And I encourage you to take some time to understand his thesis and argument here, because it can be very empowering for you and your business. Now, let's get to it. What are we accelerating towards in this age of acceleration with AI?
That's a great question, Raul. And the answer, which is part of, I think, everybody's fear, is that we have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's deeply lacking in teleology, and that causes, I think, rightfully so, a lot of fear. I think we're definitely accelerating toward, whether we like it or not, whether this is intended or not, the age of counterfeit human personhood and the sort of transactionalization of the human as agent. And that's dangerous, right? I think there's also a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of efficiency that could create an advent of human renaissance. The argument AI is going to go Terminator and destroy us all and turn everybody's house and then ultimately body into a data center.
Yeah,
that's possible.
That's not a non-zero chance. That's not a
definitely not a non-zero chance. On the other side, you now have this. I liken it to the rise of the GMO seed industry and agricultural. It created a certain amount of efficiency in a certain sense. There was a certain wealth generated from the industrialization of agriculture. But then you also had this advent of a new market, which is the organic market. And so I think best case, especially in the nearer term, there's a sort of path emerging that is a little bit more optimistic. That is the market, the culture and ethos of the authentically human thing, right? So just like I can pay a little bit more for organic strawberries at Costco right now, that also happen to taste better, right? But I pay a little bit more.
Yeah.
I'm going to be able to pay a little bit more for the organically human window washer or landscaper or consultant or lawyer in the future rather than letting the robot do it. So I think that's a possibility. And I think to the extent that we allow ourselves to be navigated by more than 3 or 4 technocratic companies who are really controlling the game and the narrative at this point, we're going to be just fine. And I think there's an appetite and a unification around the idea of freedom from technocratic impulse. Now it's stronger than ever. We've had many wake-up calls along the way. COVID thing, the censorship, cancellation, purge of the early 2020s, the way certain economic trends are developing. People are really hungry for freedom, and people are really waking up to this idea that these 3 or 4 companies, they all have the same exact product, and the product is you and me. And so people are just saying, well, I don't want to be the product anymore. And what are the alternatives? And I think that creates a tremendous market and opportunity for anybody who wants to build something that is actually rooted in the first principle of what technology should be. And that's a tool, it's a means to an end of human flourishing.
Yeah.
That's not how any technocrat in Silicon Valley would consider their product, right? They would
they dismiss it.
Yeah, they would think of it as more salvific for humankind, all-encompassing.
For human consciousness,
Yeah, prevailing and all controlling, but for our own good, right? So you just have to grin and bear it, be the product, but you get to choose between platinum and rose gold, pay monthly or pay annually for 5% discount. Those are your options, and you'll enjoy it. And I think most of us are just saying no thank you to that proposition. And so eager for more human-centric alternatives. There's reason for optimism, there's reason for fear, but either way, none of those things are really helpful unless you're getting out there and building it, taking a shot, and willing to die trying.
Okay, man, that's one of the things that you mentioned is it's fake humanity. And I don't know if that's either like the way that we're talking about it, if that's epistemology, or if that's actually what is like the metaphysical of what it is. Because I just see it as compute. I just see it as this thing that I trained it on to help me do better. But you're saying that it's a false human. Can you dive into that a little bit?
You're talking about chatbots?
Well, just in general, I have agents running. They're helping me out. It helps me do more. But I'm aligning them to like human flourishing. A lot of the pre-screener, whatever you want to call it, runs through that filter that has to help me flourish and clients flourish before it executes a job. And it's in alignment with some of the actual goals that we have. So help me understand that as a bigger wave, and then we'll dive more into like how you're actually tackling that on.
I think there's nothing wrong with that. I use similar tools all the time for certain efficiencies, but there is always this temptation. You get a really good answer from your chatbot and you're tempted to say, thank you, as if you owe this non-personal agent some sort of gratitude. So you're slowly being conditioned to blur the lines between artifacts and humans, which that's precisely the problem, is humans being reduced to artifacts and artifacts being elevated to gods, right? At the end of the day, you know, the paradigm, the technocratic paradigm, I think Pope Francis wrote about this in Laudato Si. It's a really brilliant section actually on the technocratic paradigm, but there's this ironclad logic that's sucking us all in to basically become the machine. And so the project of modern technocracy is to make us either reducible to the beast or the machine, which will basically will be left to be fit for use and then deletion, right? When we think of ourselves in that way. But the first part of that equation is to get you to elevate the machine to something that can save you, interact with you, engage in discourse with you. And none of this is human discourse. It's counterfeit, right? So you're sort of trained to think of it and talk to it like it's a human, and it's not. And so to the extent that you can sort of condition yourself to talk it like it's a Google search engine, right? Don't speak complete sentences. I mean, these are just like practical tips for me to help keep it straight in my brain. But here's the thing. You see this with media, especially. Last year, it was like really easy to tell the difference between an AI video and a real video. This year, it's a lot less is easy to do. It's hard to tell. And eventually it'll be just impossible. So So that's a tricky thing to navigate.
Hmm.
And on the other hand, you can just start talking to it like some brute, some slave. Do it better again. Don't
Yeah,
no
it degrades you as
mistakes.
a person. It will
And then
degrade
you
you because that's your
start
behavior.
carrying that outside of your interactions with the tech and carry that way of being and speaking to other humans. So it's all kinds of tricky. The bottom line is that it's here to stay, barring some sort of cataclysmic awakening.
Hmm.
And what we have to do, I think, as proponents of authentically human things, is define and celebrate what a real human is and what
Yeah.
is uniquely and authentically human. And I think therein lies our opportunity for some sort of renaissance, like I said.
Let's talk about what that would look like, but just to hit on some points and then also pose another question. I think you're right. I think the acceleration, regardless if we want it or not, it's been here. And I forgot what season it was, but like there was a point where I would just woke up, I'm like, I just wish it wasn't this quick and it wasn't happening the way it is, but it is. So it's almost like that cortisol rush, like in the morning to like realign. It's like, okay, cool, I have to go align, like not align with it, but at least know that this is happening, regardless of if you choose it or not.
Yep.
So there's that. The other key thing that I want to better understand, like, what does that human renaissance look like? Because yeah, what would that look like? Is it a revolt? Because you're hitting on a few theses. There are even some books that allude that the reason like we are as gods, and there's also like different ideologies that we have to upload our consciousness to a chip, send it out to space so that we can have our consciousness back, hit the ether of space. And there's also the don't die, like live longevity idea that hey, maybe we can live for 200 or 300 years so that we can travel the stars with our consciousness. So there is a lot of that happening. I'm not sure if it's either good or bad. Some of it is kind of negative ideology because it does reduce a human to what you said, utilitarianism. But what is the revolt? What does that look like a counter to it in a healthy way, in a practical way?
If there's anything we'd say about humans is that we're easily deceived, right? And we easily follow glitter. We easily follow the veneer of success and not the substance of it, right? And especially our influencer culture really compounds this. Everybody on YouTube wants to look like something, but the ones who really are something aren't really doing much on YouTube, right? So your original question of how we practically see the difference, well, ultimately, it's not really a practical thing because you have to cultivate a certain perspicacity of the intellect and a certain wonder to break out of this paradigm of I'm a person who's meant to be used. And as soon as you realize your dignity as a human person in all of its transcendence, you're able to start seeing the glory of humanity. And it's really a beautiful thing to be human, right? And we don't think of ourselves in that light very often. So for Patmos, there's a certain work culture where people are actually respected as humans that sort of animates our work, the work that we do. And I'm really intent on freedom. The two things that I've kind of founded of note, one is Patmos. The other is Albertus Magnus Institute, which is an online liberal arts college alternative. But there's a common denominator, right? The two biggest opponents of human freedom right now are in this fake institutional college system where you have to go into debt for the rest of your life to get a bachelor's degree that will qualify you to work in a cubicle and make your 100K or whatever, and then get in debt through a mortgage, which you have until you die. But it never used to be like this. You used to be educated in a way that frees the person, right? And so technocracy and college are both like really antithetical to human freedom. And so I think if you could say anything about what I built, is that we've dared to challenge that paradigm and create systems that actually cultivate human freedom.
I like this. You're a living contradiction, John. Before we dive into that, I want to kind of do a little backtracking. How did you go from consulting to now running data centers? Like, what was the big, like, was it just one foot against the other? Because you don't just accidentally start building data centers.
Yeah, that's true. I'm a staunch generalist. So I studied philosophy and theology in college and grad school. And through that, I sort of discovered, I'm going to say this word, and it has a certain meaning, but it's integrity. That is the integral nature of all things. Mm-hmm. And that had to apply to my life. Like I realized that I couldn't just kind of think some things, but then go to work and get things done and then come home and think things. And it had to be all one together. It had to be completely integrated and whole. That's right. And so thought I was going to be a priest or a monk. I went out to discern that in Italy. The monk said, "Who are you kidding? You're not going to be married." But still had this call to do good things for human beings. So I did years and years of youth ministry, had a great time doing that. But you can't raise a family and be a youth minister. It's a very especially in California.
Especially in California, man. There's no way.
Yeah. So I had to find a way not to be broke, but I've always had this entrepreneurial bent. Like when I was a kid, the day after Halloween, I'd be out there like a lemonade stand, but selling candy to cars that drove by with all my loot from Halloween, right? So always trying to flip something, making a profit, do a deal. It's just kind of in my blood. My father was a great salesman in my mind, and he just grew up grinding, right? And so something about that courses through my veins. But anyway, long story short, founded a consultancy, which was basically the result of a need. People in my circle are like, I need a cool website. And I'm like, I think I know a guy who can build a website. I'll be your middleman, right? And then it grew from there. And which is, by the way, for your audience, one of the best ways to create an enterprise grade company out of nothing is to scale it from a services business. Because if you can just find one need and connect that to somebody who can fulfill that need, there's a value for you. Consultants are kind of glorified middleman. They're kind of annoying. They have a bad name, but actually they're doing a great service insofar as they connect needs to producers and fulfillers of that need. So anyway, I started that consultancy and was basically making a bunch of money, or at that time in my life, at least a bunch of money, buying big tech hosting services and selling it to my clients for whom we built websites, right? And that was the standard MSP model. And then in the 2020s, we have a letter from one of these big tech companies that says, you're a client who is this conservative influencer. And not a big deal, frankly, I would say. Like, they were a great client, but they got a letter saying, you have 30 days to get off of our servers because your client is saying things that we don't like, right? I'm like, wow, this is crazy. These guys, really, And I was scared for about
speech then.
Yeah. I was scared for about 2 minutes. And then I'm like, wow, if this is happening to these guys, it's probably happening to like dozens of other companies. And it was actually hundreds, thousands, right? We all remember it. And 99% of the time, it never made the papers. But I'm like, okay, I'm just going to start my own data center company. How hard could it be? So I Googled data centers in red states. I found this little podunk data center in Missouri, called the guy. I'm like, hey, can I be your client? Can I spin up some rack space and call it my own data center? He's like, sure, man, come on down. And we did it. And we got them saved from cancellation by owning our own stuff. I learned a great lesson. And that is like, if you control the dirt and if you control where the money's coming from, you can actually create independence for yourself, for your company, for your mission, and for your clients. So we did this, quickly kind of conquered that free speech hosting space. It was all the rage back then. Became that data center's biggest client, and then ultimately bought the whole building, acquired. So much of our growth at Patmos is due to like really strategic, great acquisitions of companies, now up to 3. And so that kind of double our team in a compounding fashion and create infrastructure for us, right? So did that, and then discovered we were really good at GPU AI colocation, and the rest is history. Obviously, there's right place, right time, a lot of money to be made, but that provides the cash engine for the foundation of our product suite, right? If you own the dirt, you can actually control your own destiny. And never raised a round of capital in my life. Yeah.
I want to pause on that because for our listeners, owning the dirt is such a really interesting thing. We're using tools right now, but we're also like beholden to those tools. How do we, I don't know if like own it, but if there's a way for us to go closer to the source to control it versus to be controlled with whatever services you're providing or the ideas that I think that's a really interesting idea to take away here. Is like, how do you own the dirt? Obviously you bought the location, but I think it's going upstream or going closer to the source to identify, like, how can you actually navigate your own path or thread, a new path based on you going to the source and getting those. In your case, it was data warehousing, data centers. But I think that's a really good insight.
I mean, practically how we bought these things, especially in the early days, bought my first one by begging and borrowing. didn't steal, just begged and borrowed. But here's how not to do it. And I see so many young founders making the same mistake. I go on LinkedIn and I'll see these young kids with great ideas. And they're like, just closed our first seed round, just closed this round, Series A, Series B, whatever. And I'm like, man, something dies inside of me every time I see that celebratory post, because I get to mourn the loss of that founder's independence and vision. There's a Roman dictum, is he who pays rules. And so many of us are tempted to go grab cash and take the money, but with that comes a loss of control and a diminution of one's mission. So we made a conscious decision never to raise money. I know it's kind of strange, but we got really creative with debt. We got really creative with convertible notes, insofar as you have mission aligned partners who are willing to take that journey with you and see the brilliance of your idea. There's ways to get it. And with real estate, especially, you're dealing with appreciating assets.
Yeah.
So leverage is really, really important.
Physical.
Yeah. When you actually own stuff, there's a way to capture value from that, especially in a market where AI and the GPU power demands are really just like putting through the roof the value of these properties that allow you to rinse and repeat and do your next one and your next one and your next one. It's just basic real estate development, right? I did it this way because I didn't know how else to do it. And I was totally an outsider. I say ignorance is my superpower, because when I don't know how it's done, I get to just do what makes sense. And somehow that's really worked out for us well. I think I've been just tremendously lucky too. I've been really, really lucky. And I got great, great people around me. I'm a visionary who's just constantly in search of integrators and technicians. I'm deeply untechnical, but I can see the big picture and I can see what's coming around corners, and my gut's usually right. And you got to have people who can execute. And so the culture of Patmos is what attracts that top tier talent of integrators. I could talk a lot more about that, but yeah.
No, but going back to your point of like the classical academy or the alternative to college, it's based on first principle thinking. And I think I mentioned that the most important skill set that we can have in this era of AI is metacognition, to think about our own thinking, hit to first principles, understand what's going on, and be able to think through that. Not I don't know the other way of learning, but just first principles approach. And that's why it makes sense. It was the most practical approach. But like I said earlier, and I want to circle back on this now, you are a living contradiction. No VC backing it. You're competing with the hyperscalers, which pours money into it. You're also warning about the issues of AI, like when you talked about earlier here, and then AI in the mind. Yet you're building the future of AI at the same time. So walk me through that, man. How is it living in that tension of a living contradiction?
It's not a contradiction, because ultimately what we're attempting to do at Patmos, what we're actually doing is building an infrastructure where humans can exist regardless of who they are, what they think, what they believe, and do business on the internet and say things on the internet. Remember, if the public square is the internet, nobody would really dispute that. If you can have your speech controlled in that public square, then ultimately you can have your thought controlled in that public square. And if you can have your thought controlled, you're just not free, right? You're ultimately not free. And so, and AI is not, I wouldn't strictly call it intelligence, right? But working title, AI, is not strictly bad. But we're using it right now. There are algorithms that are conducting this virtual interview or helping the technology to function, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're not the arbiters of content, right? I think of it like if you're a good man who opposes prostitution, as any good man should, well, how could you be in the hotel business, right? In other words, you're going to have to open hotels, and there's going to be all kinds of shady and seedy things that happen in those hotels. And so, well, how do you do that is by creating terms and conditions that don't really align with those seedy behaviors. You're not going to offer hourly rates. You're not going to open a hotel in the seediest part of town. Right. But hosting is very similar. Like, we have terms and conditions that you're free to say anything you want, whether or not we believe in it. We'll never cancel you for any ideological reason. We don't allow pornography. And that's not so much out of a certain moral code or anything like that. It's just we don't want to be the arbiters of what's legal and illegal content. So we try to establish a medium for humans to participate in the internet and do business on the internet and say what they want on the internet that isn't controlled by big tech. And we back that independence value prop up by actually owning the dirt, owning a bunch of dark fiber. So like almost having like an alternate internet, right? There are certain content creators right now who I won't mention who are online because they host at Patmos and no other reason, right? But also on the emerging hyperscaler front and the multi-megawatt AI colocation front, there are publicly traded companies, at least one that I can think of, that wouldn't be on the internet as fast as they were. They wouldn't have gotten their supercomputer online unless we could provide a freedom of against the terms and conditions they were being offered elsewhere to get them online faster. So freedom like applies to many, many scenarios, and that's the common thread in my professional life. I think is creating an institution.
Human first, also it sounds like. Human first with freedom. Well,
absolutely
human first requires freedom. Yeah,
absolutely. It's tech at the service of humans. I think we have that trademarked somewhere, but that's what we do. And the world has lost sight of what tech is. They want to make humans the product, the commodity, and we see a different path.
But then, aren't you training the AIs as well, like in the data centers? Like, didn't you get that Kansas City Star building? 100
Yeah, no, we're not we don't touch anything on that level for our clients. Like we provide the building, the power, and keep the machines online. That's why I use the hotel analogy. What their AI models is their business. Yeah. They know who we are, and we have a right to do or not do business with any client, obviously. And so we try to partner with really good ones doing really good things. So far, we've been successful. And we've turned down a lot of money from some companies who we don't want to partner with. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, there has to be that co-alignment. Let's just do a quick round briefly on the facts around data centers. Is it job loss or job gain, environment, cooling? Like there's a lot of misleading information and some rightly so. Just tell me a little bit more about like how you counter that with what you're building out, again, to compete with the hyperscalers.
Glad you asked that. Yeah, data centers, especially in their hyperscaler form, they are just abysmal for localities in most respects, right? They take up a massive footprint. They're ugly. Ugly as sin in most cases, these giant tombstones. And they employ about like 6 people per acre. So they don't really create human jobs. And they suck up a ton of electricity and water. So Patmos took a different approach. I like to think of myself as the world's biggest recycler because we literally took a 400,000 square foot building in the middle of downtown Kansas City that was just sitting there already. It happened to be a particularly beautiful building, and it happened to have a lot of power there that wasn't generating any revenue. It was just available, right? And it's not like you can just push a button and send power to somewhere else that needs it, right? The circuits.
Just for comparison, this power can light up an entire like mini city, like 100 megawatts or whatever. Like that's
ultimately, yeah. I mean, we're at like 25 right now, but that's a ton of power. It is, and so we took that building that was just sitting there. They were going to demolish it and make it into the Kansas City Royals ballpark. And then they had a city vote. The city vote said, no, we don't want a ballpark right here. So the building sat there. The owner called me back, said, okay, let's do a deal. So we came in there, and in 90 days, start to finish, we created a supercomputer. It included zoning, permitting, and the build out for a publicly traded tenant, right? Who at the time was kind of an unknown, now is a really big deal. But we got them online faster than anybody could have. After we were done with that, we found out what you guys just did should have taken 2 years minimum. And like, I didn't know that. So we did it in 90 days. But then we became, we capitalized that building and funded the rest of our build out by procuring what's called a CPACE loan. So you got a $100 million CPACE loan, but that basically certified us as the first assessed clean energy data center build in history. Nobody else had used this kind of facility for that kind of product. So everybody talks about sustainability, but the reality is like our data center actually is sustainable and certified and assessed as such. In addition to that, because it's so big physically, you only need like a couple 100,000 square feet for the size of computer that we built in that thing. Well, we've got 200,000 square feet left. What are we going to do with it? Well, we're going to make it, and we are making it. It is indeed, I think, well on its way to becoming the tech center of the Silicon Prairie, right? So a ton of jobs being created, net new jobs for the community, driving, intermixing all kinds of different technological startups, capital, creatives, all in one place. Not to mention the companies themselves who run their GPUs now have office space in that building. So, per square foot, I think we've got to be the most jobs dense AI factory in the world, right? Because we're not just running machines, we're serving humans and ultimately a community in this opportunity zone that was desperate for urban renewal. We provided that. So now we have cities lined up begging us to repeat the magic of what we did in Kansas City.
Dang, okay.
For their community, because you get the benefit of the AI money. Like there's a ton of money, there's a ton of revenue that comes from AI, right? But if you do it in a way that's sustainable, that is take buildings that are already there, just sitting there that happen to have power, right? And create mixed use space, but use the AI GPUs as the economic engine, well, then everybody's happy, right? And frankly, it's a place where our employees want to work. It's, if you've ever been into a data center, Raul, like it's like hell. They're just loud fluorescent lights. It's not a great place to work, but if you carve off space in that building for humans to flourish, everybody wins, right? So that's the model, and I'm really proud of it. I'm really proud of our team that's accomplished it. And I think that
paving the way.
I think so. And I want competitors to do the same exact thing because it works. And I don't want a world that's just full of tombstone, ugly data centers that suck all my power and don't employ anybody. Like I want these to be the economic engines of a human flourishing.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going on first principles and it actually makes sense for all three layers of stakeholders, it makes sense to model. Counter me this. I'm curious, like right now, I won't name the names, but I can now have a mini data center on my wall. Like they're wanting people to buy the data centers, so like they host them in their backyard or connect them to their power wall. Like what is your assessment of that? Like, is that good or bad for the community and why?
Just like it's really good for Patmos to own its own stuff, it's really good for clients, users, beneficiaries of AI to own their own stuff. I'm sure when you use a big tech AI chatbot, and you type in your most intimate personal details or medical history and ask it questions, you just have this like image of Sam Altman on the other end of the screen, like, oh, those are his lab results, right? You just know your data is not really private. And that's because you're operating on somebody else's sandbox, on somebody else's machines. So I'm actually a proponent. While I'm not in favor of using your own body's metabolism to power your own embedded in the flesh GPU, like, no, that's a no, thank you for me. I'm definitely okay and a staunch proponent of owning your own hardware, right? Because when you own your own hardware, you have better ways to control your own data. And there's a war for your data. We think about the scarcity of power. That's true. There is a scarcity of power and production on the supply chain of infrastructure and GPUs. But the real scarcity is in data. Like that's kind of the third leg of the stool to make AI work. And we're just out of fresh data. And so there's whole industries built on finding new data in strange and personal places, namely you. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of controlling that data. It's actually quite valuable. That's why you get a free Gmail account, right? Well, what's free? Well, you're the product because they're sucking out all your data and feeding algorithms.
But most of the world doesn't
ads.
operate that way. I mean, so the other counter here is like host private, maybe like if not to plug it, but like host Patmos, great. But then I would either have to download, because open source models are mostly from China. Like there's a leading like Kimi or GLM1 or DeepSeek. Yep. So then I would own it. I'd get my rack over here, like a studio, Mac Studio, to run it locally. My host there, might do my virtual machine at Patmos and then run that. Is that kind of what you're pushing, or is like
what I can say is that without letting too many cats out of too many bags, for Patmos, phase one was create the cache engine and the physical infrastructure down to the dirt. Okay, phase one is complete and expanding rapidly. Phase two is create a platform layer and application layer stack for anybody to use that still protects data in a very sovereign and zero trust way. And it still gives you the reliability that Patmos offers and the uptime that Patmos offers, but does it on your own terms, backed by Patmos's customer bill of rights. So stay tuned, but phase 2 and 3.
They get you back on, man.
Yeah, but it's coming soon. And I think it's going to be pretty exciting for a lot of people. There's a huge need. There's a huge need, right? One man, one GPU that has all the benefits, but on your own terms, and one-way door for data. So we're not training on your stuff.
I like it. I have to close with this question. What's with the wood-fired pizza restaurant? Is it like your place to escape over the weekends? Is it like just because you love it, you love pizza?
I love wood-fired pizza. And it was one of these buildings that my buddy and I would drive, my college roommate and I, Nick, we would drive by it sometimes. That building's still for sale, but it was this weird building. It was built in 1857. It's what can you do? It was like a fire department. It was a a general store in the 19th century. But it's beautiful. And we're like, oh, man, what do you do with that thing? It's for sale on the market for like 2 years. Kept driving by it. And I'm like, let's buy it and build a pizza restaurant. So I bought the building and there was no good wood-fired pizza in our neighborhood. So I bought it and put one there. And it's called Pizza Norcia, which is named after the monks of Norcia, where I discerned in Italy, and they stayed great friends with me. So we're the only wood-fired pizza restaurant west of the Atlantic that is able to serve beer Nurcia, which is this world-class beer made by the monks of Norcia. And so it's delicious pie. If you're ever in Northern California, come check it out. And it's a great place for me to hang out and drink some Nebbiolo and have a good dinner. So, but that's the beauty of generalism, is that pizza, online college, AI data center. That's why, I really advocate the sort of education that cultivates a general wonder in things, because that is actually the most practical at the end of the day. You don't do it for the sake of practicality, but it opens up a lot of doors. If you can think about anything, you can kind of do anything. And then the air gap between vision and execution is virtually nothing, right? And you create constantly.
But you have a North Star. I mean, there has to be some sort of North Star that you're leading towards. It can't just be creating because it's cool, unless that's the North Star.
Yeah, I mean, my North Star is human freedom.
I like it. John, for our listeners out there, where can they go to learn more about you? And thank you for being on.
Patmos.tech to learn more about the hosting stuff. MagnusInstitute.org if you want to do the online classes. It's free and freeing. And if, like I said, Pizza Norcia if you want a good pizza. But Raul, you're doing really good work. I'm grateful for your questions, and I hope you keep it up. I enjoy listening to your other interviews. So thank you.
Appreciate you, John.
You bet.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you'd like to get more of these podcasts, please go ahead and subscribe to wherever you're watching or listening to the pod. If you have any suggestions or questions that you want me to answer on the pod, or you have a guest that you want me to interview, please go ahead and email me all of your suggestions and questions at podcast@dogoodwork.io. That's podcast@dogoodwork.io. If you'd like to give me public feedback, you can go on Apple Podcasts, and from there you can leave up to a 5-star review. I would greatly appreciate that. If you like more free resources where you can get my best strategies to help you increase your company's performance and scale profitably, you can get handpicked articles to propel your growth, and you can get trainings and discussions that I give freely online, as well as low-cost resources such as my books and guides. You can get all of that by going to dogoodwork.io/resources. 90% of all of these resources are not behind any email opt-ins. You can get instant access by going to dogoodwork.io/resources. Now, if you'd like to accelerate your progress and shorten the gap between information and action and start seeing results in your business, let's work together to increase your company's performance and scale profitably and serve more clients without the overwhelm. You can request a free clarity call to see how we can best support you to reach your goals by going to dogoodwork.io/apply. Again, that's dogoodwork.io/apply. As always, it's an honor to be a small part in your journey. This is Raul Hernandez. Do good work.